So I figured what I would do is just go through really quickly, and having been an incumbent, I have a record on pretty much all of the questions that you all have asked. And so I'm going to try to let my record speak for itself. First on the environment, and I sit on a lot of the committees that address these issues. I sit on the Courts of Justice Committee, the Civil Subcommittee, the Education Committee, and the Commerce and Labor Committee. And most of the environmental issues go to the Commerce and Labor Committee because a lot of them have to do with sort of the flip side of energy. And I introduced legislation that would have put forward some of the recommendations of Governor Kane's Climate Change Commission. And that included things from providing an incentive to the power companies so that they would use more renewable energy as part of their portfolio. And it was a pretty complicated bill. My piece of it got passed, but the most important piece of it, which was the one that would require the companies to use a particular percentage of their portfolio to be renewables, didn't. And as part of that debate, what everybody kept trying to focus on is jobs. And one of the things that I keep trying to tell people is coal and the old way of doing business providing energy is not the only way to create jobs. We can create whole new industries by bringing forward new sources of power that are renewable or clean. And the only way we're going to do it is if we have the vision to do it. When President Kennedy said we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, that wasn't just a lofty goal he wanted to do. He wanted to do it because he wanted to beat the Russians and he wanted to create whole new industries. And whole new industries and inventions were created to put us on the moon. But the government said, this is a goal we want to have. And we can do that in the environmental area, in the energy area as well. And that's one of the things that I've tried to focus on. I also, just very briefly on the, we have a lot of natural resources in Virginia that are taken for granted. And one of them is the view of the James River. That, you know, every once in a while we have developers that want to come in and put in developments that will block that view. And I put in a bill that I'm being recognized for later this month, or next month, that would honor that view and hopefully protect that view and say, Richmond got its name because of the view of the James River from Libby Hill. We need to protect that view for future generations, not just for the sake of protecting it, although we should and provide it to our children, but for the sake of the tourism that it brings. And all the people that want to come and use that river and take advantage of its beauty. On immigration, most of the immigration bills that come in go through the Commerce and Labor, Courts of Justice, and the Education Committee. And we have had bills, some have been touched on, that would punish the children whose parents bring them here, they had no say in the matter, by saying you can't attend a Virginia college or university. And in case that bill doesn't get passed, we'll put in bills that will say if you do get in, you can't pay in-state tuition. Even though you grew up here, you lived here, you may have had a job here, you may have paid taxes here, you can't pay in-state tuition, which effectively prices those kids out of college. We've had bills that, you know, I found it really ironic that the other day the Richmond Times-Dispatch had two articles, I think they were 5 pages apart. One of them talked about the law in Arizona. And you better believe there are people in Virginia who want to put in a law that says that the police can come up and ask for you for your papers. I think we fought a war against one government that asked people for their papers, and now there are other governments that want to ask for it again. And in Arizona they say, well, we need to fight immigration because people are coming to steal our jobs. 5 pages later, there was an article where 5 or 6 governors went to Congress and said, hey, guess what? We have certain jobs we can't find anybody to take. In certain industries, particularly in the farming industry, they can't find anybody to take these jobs, and the immigration laws that are being put in place are preventing them from hiring the people who want them. So that issue, the immigration issue, first of all, it's a federal issue, and most of the bills we get at the state level, the state and our businesses are not equipped to implement federal immigration law. We have no business doing it. We should leave it to them, and we ought not punish people who made a choice to come here to provide their families a better way. On women's issues, I am unapologetically pro-choice, but I got a brand new perspective when I had a baby. I became the first member of the House of Delegates to have a baby while in office. And I learned that a lot of our abortion laws or bills don't account for the difference between what you think of as elective abortion, which I think is between a woman and her doctor and her family members and her God and nobody else. But there are women who have wanted pregnancies where things go terribly wrong. Guess what? Same procedure. And a lot of the bills that are passed to address one capture the other. So now these trap regulations, we're saying to poor women who go to Planned Parenthood because they can afford it, for whatever reason, they now might not have a place to go because these onerous regulations could put Planned Parenthood out of business. Yet a man can go to an outpatient facility and have a vasectomy or whatever he wants, and they don't have to live by the same regulations. I fought it on the House floor, and I'll continue to try to turn it back. On discrimination issues, again, a lot of these bills come through particularly Commerce and Labor. I have co-sponsored legislation that would allow particularly county governments or businesses to provide health benefits or any kind of benefits for same-sex couples. I have fought any bill that looked, smelled, or even hinted at discrimination of any kind. I believe that a man and a woman should be able to get married, and a woman and a woman should be able to get married, and a man should be able to get married. And I said here 2 years ago that I would fight against, I would try to work to roll back the Marshall-Newman Amendment, because 100 years ago, my great-grandparents wouldn't have been able to get married because people thought they were property. 40 years ago, my husband and I wouldn't have been able to get married because we're of different races. It's wrong. On bullying, again, I have a son. When you become a parent, I used to always wonder why my mom was paranoid. Now I know. When you are a parent, everything scares you to death. And I look at my son, who's 14 months old, and I'm going to have to leave after I speak because he's at home waiting for me. I look at him every day, and I'm terrified of what his future is going to bring. And so, yeah, I think we need anti-bullying policies, whatever the source of the bullying. I think we also, and he's the reason I'm there, and I know I'm running out of time, he is the reason that I am there. Because when I ran for the House, I didn't have a child then, but I wanted to be sure that any child, whether it was mine, whether it was yours, whether he was born in Gilpin Court, whether he was born in Church Hill, whether he was born in Lakeside or Monument Avenue. And my district has $2.5 million mansions on Monument Avenue and every housing project north of the river and everything in between. And I am in the House of Delegates to ensure that those kids, wherever they are born, have access to a free, high-quality public education, which they're promised by the Constitution of Virginia, and we haven't lived up to it. That they can walk the streets and know that they're safe, and if something happens to them, the police will come and try to take care of them and not re-victimize them. That if they do get in trouble, if they make a mistake, that they live in a Virginia where once they've paid their debt to society, they'll be forgiven, and they won't have a word F, felony, slapped on their face that will ruin the rest of their lives. So yes, I have fought for, and not just Joe Morrissey, he got credit for it before he got here, but every Democratic member of the Richmond and Henrico delegations, every member of the Legislative Black Caucus has fought for years to have an automatic rights restoral for nonviolent felonies. And for violent felonies, they need to be addressed on a case-by-case basis, as do those who are still there waiting for parole who are under the old system, and yet every time their parole hearing comes up, they look at their record and say, oh, what'd you do? No. It's not right. And that's why I'm in the House of Delegates, and that's why with your help, I'll be back. And thank you all for having me tonight. JenniferMcClellan.com is my website if you want to know anything else on a question I didn't touch.